Hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Terminator exploration video, where you'll get to meet some of the most iconic baddies of the franchise. These liquid metal Terminators are notorious shape-shifting killing machines that can impersonate anyone and everyone, and what's worse, they can fashion weapons out of their body parts. These shape-changing machines made of mimetic polyalloy are extremely difficult to terminate and are most feared by the Resistance members, even Sarah and John Connor. Before we begin dissecting the liquid metal Terminators, we've got a quick roundup about what the Terminator franchise is all about. But before we get into that, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The War with the Machines. How it all started. The first film in the series, titled The Terminator, hit theaters in 1984, and that's also the year the film is set. The second movie, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, introduced the liquid metal Terminator model as the central villain. Judgment Day came out in 1991 and is set in 1995, 11 years after the events of the first movie. In the 1984 film, the key characters of the franchise were introduced: Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese, whose son, John Connor, was to become the leader of a human resistance group in the future. So, what exactly happened in the future in the Terminator storyline? We'll tell you. Machines became self-aware and almost wipe out humanity in a nuclear holocaust on Judgment Day, August 29th, 1997 to be precise, turning Earth into a wasteland. Now, this John Connor was destined to lead the fight against the machines in the future and was humanity's only hope to defeat the self-aware artificial intelligence Skynet. In the first movie, Skynet sends a Terminator model T-800 to the year 1984 from the future of 2029 with the mission to hunt down and kill a young Sarah Connor so that John Connor is never born. But John's father, Kyle Reese, also traverses back from the year of 2029 and shares an intimate moment with Sarah Connor when John is conceived. By the end of the first movie, Kyle dies defending a pregnant Sarah against the T-800, and the Terminator is destroyed. This T-800 was famously portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who returned in future films to play various incarnations of the cyborg. Now, let's move on to the next movie. Terminator 2 is set in the year 1995, and John Connor is about 10 years old. He's an unruly kid who lives with foster parents because sometime in the past, Sarah tried to destroy a computer facility in her attempt to be vigilant against the future war with the machines. This landed her in a mental asylum for the criminally insane. The film begins with a T-800, played by Schwarzenegger once again, landing in Los Angeles in 1995. This one's been reprogrammed by John Connor from the future and sent back in time to protect his younger self from Skynet's assassination attempts. Simultaneously, another Terminator, the liquid metal T-1000 sent by Skynet, also lands in 1995 Los Angeles with the directive to kill the 10-year-old John. The T-1000 marks its first appearance in the movie with a kill. It instantly murders a cop and impersonates him while driving away in the cop car. The T-1000 also burns a gigantic hole in a barbed fence just to pass through it, showing just a glimpse of its immense destructive capabilities. Anyhow, both Terminators go out looking for John and both track him down to the mall arcade and come face to face with each other. Schwarzenegger arrives just in time to save John, and what begins is a mini Armageddon of gunfire. As John escapes the mall on his bike, the liquid Terminator chases after him on foot and then pursues him by hijacking a truck. Schwarzenegger intervenes just in time and pulls John onto his bike, preventing him from being crushed by the T-1000's truck. The vehicle crashes against a divider and blows up in flames. As the T-800 and John ride away believing the T-1000 dead, the liquid metal Terminator rises from the flames in its true silvery form. The T-800 intends to drive away from town with John, but they stop to make a quick call to his foster parents. From their voices, John and the T-800 realize the T-1000 has infiltrated the house and the foster parents are already dead. This is when John realizes all that his mother had told him about the war with the machines was actually true, and he decides to go release her from the facility with the help of Schwarzenegger. John makes the T-800 promise not to kill anyone. Back at the asylum, Sarah was trying to escape when the T-1000 infiltrates the facility and disguises itself as a guard. Just when it tracked down Sarah, Schwarzenegger and John arrive to save the day. An iconic fight ensues between the two Terminators, which ends with Sarah and John leaving the building in a car hijacked by Schwarzenegger. The Liquid Terminator chases after them before being shot down by the T-800, at least for the time being. As the trio heads south, planning to leave Los Angeles, the T-800 briefs Sarah on what brought about the birth of Skynet. Miles Dyson, the director of special projects at Cyberdyne Systems, has come across the endoskeleton arm and CPU chip of the destroyed T-800 from the previous movie. And in just a few months, Dyson would study the remains and complete the artificial intelligence, Skynet, giving it access to all of the country's military forces. Hearing this, Sarah decides to kill Dyson before Skynet is even born and takes off on her own, leaving behind John in the T-800's care. But eventually, she couldn't bring herself to kill Dyson in front of his family. John and the Terminator arrive at the scene and brief Dyson that if he succeeds in making the Skynet processor, it will lead to the death of billions in the future. Together, they infiltrate the Cyberdyne lab to destroy all of Dyson's research work, but the cops are alerted, leading to a gunfight in the lab, which kills Dyson and destroys the microprocessor he built. Sarah and John manage to escape with the CPU and endoskeleton arm of the previous Terminator from the lab in a SWAT truck driven by the T-800. They're pursued by the T-1000 on a police chopper, which crashes into the truck and blows up in flames. The T-1000 then starts pursuing them on a huge truck carrying liquid nitrogen. The thrilling chase ends with both the Terminator's vehicles crash landing inside a steel factory. The liquid nitrogen bursts open and pours all over the T-1000, freezing it solid. The T-800 then shatters it into pieces with a single shot. However, the heat from a nearby cauldron melts the frozen bits, and the machine reintegrates into a human form within minutes. What follows is an intense face-off between the two machines, which ends with the T-1000 almost destroying Schwarzenegger. It then imitates Sarah's voice to lure out John, but the T-800 switches to an alternate power mode and comes back to life again. Then it fires a grenade launcher at the T-1000, toppling it over into a molten steel vault, causing it to disintegrate. John throws down the chip and the arm of the previous Terminator into the molten steel, and the T-800 asks that they lower it into the molten steel so that every trace of these advanced machines is destroyed from the world and nothing can be reverse engineered. As the T-800 is demolished, the movie wraps up with Sarah's narration about a hopeful future. As per this timeline, Skynet is never built and Judgment Day is averted in the future. The T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Powers and abilities explored. So people, that's all the havoc that the Liquid Terminator prototype wreaks in its first ever appearance in the Terminator films. This shape-shifting menace, played by Robert Patrick, is way more advanced than the T-800s. The T-800s are cybernetic organisms, infiltrator robots, with living tissue over a metal endoskeleton, whereas the Terminators, such as the T-1000 prototype, are entirely made of an artificial liquid metal called Mimetic polyalloy, which looks like liquid mercury. The T-1000's liquid metal body is seen for the first time when it walks out of the blazing fire after its truck crashes and explodes. It appears in its true form, a silver metallic humanoid cyborg, before transforming back into the cop. The Mimetic polyalloy consists of billions of tiny individual functional units, which allows the polyalloy to be fluid and hence assume the shape of anything it touches. Interestingly enough, Skynet devised a new technology to create the liquid metal Terminators in the future. Every molecule of the polyalloy contained the blueprints of the total T-1000, which means that every molecule was a miniature version of the T-1000, and that's what helped it reintegrate and heal so quickly. Recovery is one of the main built-in directives of the T-1000 because it gets weaker when it loses mass. When the T-1000 loses body mass in an attack, the molecules are pre-programmed to rejoin the main mass up to a range of 14 kilometers. But when out of range, it camouflages with a local object and waits for the main machine to come back in range again. Being made of mimetic polyalloy, the T-1000 doesn't sweat or bleed or produce body odor like the living tissue Terminators, and hence are easily detected by dogs as non-human beings. However, the T-1000 prototype cannot transform into smaller objects such as a book or, let's say, a pack of cigarettes because it would require too little of its original polyalloy volume. The T-800 explained to John that the liquid metal Terminator also can't turn into a bomb, as the polyalloy is not equipped to transform into complex machinery. Another limitation of the liquid metal Terminator is that it cannot create heavy weapons out of its polyalloy, but it can successfully transform its arms into sharp weapons of any shape and size. In a creepy move, the T-1000 was also able to generate additional arms while piloting a helicopter in a scene. "It can imitate anything it samples by physical contact," were the exact words Schwarzenegger used to describe this advanced prototype, and that's brilliantly shown in the scene where the T-1000 blends in with the checkered floor of the facility where Sarah was located. As soon as a security guard walked across the checkered floor, the T-1000 was able to transform into the person, picking itself up bit by bit like liquid glue off the floor. In its liquid form, the T-1000 can take any shape and size. During the elevator scene, it plopped down on the elevator floor like a blob of dough before taking human form again. The T-1000 did it again when he slid through a tiny gap in the helicopter windshield in the form of a blob. Later, when the Terminator stabs it with a spear, the T-1000 simply drags the spear out of its slime-like body with a wobbling sound. Judgment Day has many iconic scenes, and perhaps the most memorable is when the liquid metal Terminator walks through the iron-barred gates of the asylum. Of course, he literally walks through them. The T-1000 is also smarter than the T-800 as it can emote better and conceal its real identity like it did while interrogating John's foster parents about the kid's whereabouts while impersonating a cop. It even compliments John, saying he's a good-looking kid. Later, the T-1000 kills John's foster mother, turns into her for a quick minute to lure in John, and even mimics her voice over the phone. This machine is designed to kill and to complete its mission at any cost, be it through firepower or tactical abilities. When it failed to terminate John at his foster parents' house, instead of going on another manhunt for the kid, the T-1000 predicted John's next moves. It deduced that John would try to save his mother, Sarah, from the asylum, but instead of going after John, it tried to kill Sarah in order to impersonate her. But before that, it turns into an asylum guard to infiltrate the facility. In addition to being brutal killers, the Terminators are also learning computers, but the T-1000 is a much faster learner than its predecessor. It's able to anticipate Sarah and John's every move. When Sarah and John escaped from the facility, the T-1000 figured out that Sarah would go after Skynet's creator, Miles Dyson, next. So instead of chasing them down, the T-1000 simply headed to Dyson's location. When the T-800 shoots the T-1000 for the first time, it leaves a gaping hole in its shoulder, but without causing any functional damage. The shotgun rounds left it with multiple such dents and holes in its chest, which, however, reintegrated immediately, allowing the T-1000 to attack Schwarzenegger back within a jiffy. In a later scene, when Schwarzenegger shot it in the face with the shotgun, the T-1000's face slowly split open into two, but merged back within a few seconds. Rounds of bullets fired by both Sarah and the T-800 only left dents in its chest, but failed to even slow it down as the dents fixed themselves within seconds. In the final chase scene, the Terminator fired several rounds into the T-1000's face, neck, and chest, leaving dents in its structure which healed within seconds. It's also superhumanly strong, of course, to the point that it can throw around a bulky T-800 model and send it crashing through a wall. As a deadly hand-to-hand combatant, the T-1000 showed great tactics, such as when it was pinned to a wall in the steel factory, it was able to reverse its face in an instant. And all the punches that the Terminator threw at it simply passed through its slimy body instead of causing any damage to the internal structure of the T-1000. At the steel factory, it beat the Terminator to a pulp and pinned it to the floor with a steel rod. It's also fast enough to almost outrun John on a speeding bike through heavy traffic. In another scene, the T-1000 chased after Sarah and John's speeding car and caught up with them simply by running. The T-1000 can transform its body parts into killing weapons like it did while stabbing John's foster father through the mouth. It can transform into solid metal objects, and when disguised as a human, it can convert its body parts into attacking weapons. It stabbed a security guard in the eye by transforming its finger into a gigantic metal pin. Later, when Sarah, John, and Schwarzenegger were trying to escape the facility in an elevator, the T-1000 transformed its arms into a metal plate and forced open the gates of the elevator. It also pierced the elevator walls several times by creating a gigantic knife, trying to stab the three inside. It also turned its arms into metal hooks to claw into Sarah's car and drag out John. The T-1000 converted its arm into a metal spear again to kill an innocent truck driver and steal the vehicle. Later, it pierced Sarah's shoulders with its transformed arms, and only retracted them when the Terminator sliced up its torso with a metal rod. Can the T-1000 be killed? Given all of its advanced abilities, one can't help but think, so how can the liquid metal Terminator actually be destroyed? In the final scenes of the movie, Little John asked the T-800 if the liquid metal Terminator is dead, and Schwarzenegger answered, "It is terminated." The T-1000 can't withstand extreme temperatures, and by extreme, we mean the 1535 degrees Celsius that's required to smelt iron. In the last scene, when the T-1000 falls into the molten iron cauldron, it lets out warped screeches and morphs into the various human forms it had assumed before and transforms into sharp weapons, before finally giving up and disintegrating completely. Such high temperatures could possibly damage the components of the polyalloy, changing the alloy at a molecular level. The T-1000 is programmed to reintegrate from any given state, but in this condition, its self-preservation protocol fails completely, rendering it practically out of service. Again, when the liquid nitrogen poured over the T-1000, a temperature of about 196 degrees Celsius froze its silvery liquid polyalloy completely solid, and it was shattered to frozen bits with one shot from a gun. However, the broken polyalloy bits thawed near a burning cauldron, and its reintegration program kicked in, allowing the machine to gather all of the bits and stand back on its feet once more. Another significant weakness of the liquid metal Terminators is that they could be destroyed by constant exposure to extremely corrosive substances, such as heavily concentrated hydrochloric acid, as seen in the 2015 movie Terminator Genisys. It could corrode the molecular structure of the polyalloy, stopping it from reintegrating. Another T-1000 that appeared in the 4-part comic book series Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Cybernetic Dawn, met with a similar fate. The T-1000, which had assumed the identity of FBI Special Agent Karen Stern, was vulnerable to a particular corrosive substance, the solvent 27B/6. In the final showdown between Sarah Connor and Karen Stern in the comics, Sarah lured the T-1000 into a chemistry lab and doused it in the solvent, sending the liquid Terminator into a concussive shock and eventually destroying it. Having said all that, this infiltrator prototype can still withstand pretty high temperatures as well, ranging up to 300 degrees Celsius, as they often walked out of explosions unharmed. Meet the T-1000 from Terminator Genisys. The T-1000 also appeared in the 2015 film Terminator Genisys, the 5th installment of the franchise, which was started by James Cameron in 1984. The movie Genisys branched off from the timeline of the 1984 film and created its own story arc while retaining the crucial elements of Terminator lore, such as Skynet's sinister deeds, the nuclear apocalypse of Judgment Day, and the humans' subsequent war on the machines. In this storyline, at some point, Skynet created a Terminator model series with nanotechnology, the T-1000 named Alex, and its unique ability to infect others made it the most advanced of them all. Skynet uploaded itself onto this successfully created T-1000 so that this machine could use the time displacement equipment to ensure Skynet's creation in the past. In John Connor's present reality, his resistance team has just successfully carried out Operation Chrono and taken down the Skynet Defense Network headquarters in the Cheyenne Mountains in Colorado, and they were preparing to reclaim the world back from the machines once and for all. Meanwhile, Skynet uses time travel and sends a Terminator T-800, the OG Terminator model that Schwarzenegger popularized, back to 1984, with the directive to kill John Connor's mother, Sarah. John's protege in this timeline, a soldier named Kyle Reese, who is also destined to be John's father, volunteers to go back to 1984 to save Sarah from the T-800, just like in the first Terminator movie. Sometime after this, Alex directs a T-1000 to go even further in the past, all the way back to 1973, to kill Sarah when she was just 9 years old, but the T-1000 could only manage to kill Sarah's parents as a reprogrammed T-800 named later as Pops arrived from the future to save her. In 1984, when Kyle Reese arrived in the past to save Sarah, the T-1000 showed up again with the sole purpose of killing Kyle. It impersonated a police officer and attacked Kyle in a department store before hiding in the store by merging with a huge mirror. Sarah intervened and saved Kyle when the T-1000 attached a piece of itself to Sarah's car as a tracking device. It tracked them to a warehouse where the liquid metal Terminator activated a fallen T-800 using a drop of its mimetic polyalloy. It also pierced through Pop's endoskeleton by fashioning its limbs as a spear. The T-1000 went on to impersonate Kyle and lure out Sarah, but she could tell them apart by shooting the decoy in the foot. And she tricked the T-1000 into a room full of hydrochloric acid kept in barrels on the ceiling ledge. She shot and pierced the acid barrels, dunking the T-1000 in the corrosive substance and had it almost destroyed when the scattered polyalloy bits gathered back together and took on an amorphous form that lashed out at Sarah. This is when Pops managed to free itself from the T-1000 spikes and forced the T-1000 under the acid barrels until the liquid metal Terminator corroded away completely. Meanwhile, Kyle and Sarah did some calculations and decided to time travel to 2017 to stop Skynet. There, Sarah and Kyle learn that a new global operating system is about to be unveiled by Cyberdyne Systems, the OG creators of Skynet. In 2017, as the launch of this new self-aware system drew closer, Kyle and Sarah strapped up the launch chamber of the Cyberdyne Systems headquarters with bombs, with the intention of destroying the mainframe and preventing Skynet from being introduced worldwide. Meanwhile, a violent clash between Pops and a T-1000 Terminator triggered the explosions around the building, killing the T-1000 and preventing Genisys from being activated. This is when a torn-apart Pops lands into a cauldron of mimetic polyalloy and comes out in a renewed form. As Pops takes Sarah and Kyle to a safe place, it's revealed that Genisys's core survived the explosion in a subterranean safe chamber. How deadly was the T-1000 from Terminator Genisys? Now, let's talk about the deadly abilities that this version of the T-1000 showed in Terminator Genisys. The T-1000, played by actor Lee Byung-hun, was shot several times by Kyle Reese with his advanced guns. It was even run over by Sarah with a truck, but dealt no damage to the machines. In fact, when Sarah and Kyle fired at it with assault rifles and shotguns, the bullets simply passed through its liquid metal body, and it was slightly affected only once by the ballistic momentum. This happens again when Sarah and Kyle shoot at it with the M16 rifles inside the factory shed. The bullets just pass through the Terminator without any significant damage. Just like the T-1000 from Terminator 2, this one too was able to convert its arms into blades and spears. It also converted them into metallic hooks to claw into Kyle and Sarah's truck, and it was only after the duo shot at the blades and disconnected them from the truck that the T-1000 sort of retreated into its police car. When Kyle fired a grenade launcher at it and blew up the car, the T-1000 was supposedly disintegrated for the time being, but of course, it made a comeback. So, in both the movies, Terminator 2 and Terminator Genisys, the T-1000 models were terminated by their predecessor, the T-800. Which brings us to the question, how does the T-1000 fare in comparison to the T-800? In Genisys, the mimetic polyalloy of the T-1000 was extremely vulnerable to hydrochloric acid. When Pops held the T-1000 under the acid-filled barrels, it only destroyed part of its jacket and living tissue on its arm, not the endoskeleton. However, the T-1000 immediately started to disintegrate as the acid destroyed the polyalloy on a molecular level. One might argue that the presence of an endoskeleton makes the T-800 far more hardy and durable, but the T-1000 more than makes up for it with its ability to quickly recover from heavy damage. Also, the T-1000 sent in 1973 to kill a young Sarah displayed no glitches even in 1984, but the T-800 from 1973 showed signs of glitching and faltering because of its decade-long stint on Earth. Meet the cold and calculating T-1001 from the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Another liquid metal Terminator, or let's say Terminatrix, an advanced T-1001, appeared in the TV series The Sarah Connor Chronicles. This show ran for 2 seasons between 2008 and 2009, and the series was set after the events of the movie Judgment Day. However, as per this storyline, despite Sarah and John's efforts to stop Skynet's creation, it does come into existence, but much later, and Judgment Day happens in the year 2011. In the pilot episode, Sarah and John are transported to the year 2007, when Skynet is just taking form, and the storyline runs till the events of 2009. In this storyline too, 2 Terminators are sent from the future, one to kill John and another to protect him. Frustrated with their life of running, Sarah and John decide to prevent Judgment Day again with the help of their protector Terminator named Cameron, and they plan to do that by acquiring an intuitive computer named the Turk, which however falls into the wrong hands and is eventually purchased by Zira Corp. That's the company that created another sentient computer named John Henry that the T-1001 came to perceive as its son. In the Sarah Connor Chronicles, the T-1001 first appears in a post-Judgment Day scene where resistance soldiers on board a nuclear submarine were returning to the US after scouting through a Skynet-controlled territory. When Officer Goodnow opened a mysterious box, the liquid metal Terminator leaped out and impaled the officer by fashioning its finger into a spike. It then impersonated Goodnow for the time being, escaped through the air vent, and supposedly traveled back in time to the pre-Judgment Day world where it took on the identity of Catherine Weaver. Much before the T-1001 Terminator arrived from the future, ZeroCorp was founded by the real Catherine Weaver and her husband Lachlan, both of whom died around 2005. Lachlan's death in a plane crash made headlines, but Catherine's death was more off-screen, so it wasn't known whether she was actually dead or not. Meanwhile, the shape-shifting T-1001, played by Shirley Manson, was sent to the past on an infiltration mission, and it assumed the identity of Catherine and took over as the head of ZeroCorp to actually fight the birth of Skynet in order to secure a different outcome in the future war against the machines. She began working towards building another artificial intelligence that came to be known as John Henry. The T-1001 intended this AI to be different from Skynet, as it would be built with a sympathetic approach towards humans. However, that doesn't mean Catherine wasn't an evil Terminator. She murdered several humans to keep the AI John Henry a secret, even at the cost of risking the real Catherine's daughter, Savannah's life. And the first step to that was creating a special department called Babylon within ZeroCorp that would solely focus on John Henry's creation. When one of her junior colleagues questioned her decision and spoke about her dismissively in the washroom, the T-1001 disguised itself as a urinal and impaled him through the head by forming a spike with her finger. Catherine Weaver appears again following a mishap at a nuclear power plant when she disguised herself as the owner of another artificial intelligence company and announced that AI would be used in nuclear power plants from now on in order to eradicate human error. When the manager turned out to be a hindrance to the T-1001's power plant plans, she turned into a seductress and flirted with the manager, only to kill him later by transforming her tongue into a polyalloy weapon, sliding it inside his mouth and suffocating him. Catherine Weaver also convinces FBI agent Ellison to find out more about the remains of a Terminator from 1999 and to actually procure one for her research. Ellison eventually gets her the Terminator named Cromartie in an inactive state that was sent to kill John Connor at the beginning of the storyline. Catherine connects the renewed body of Cromartie with the AI John Henry and asks Ellison to improve this machine. Next, in order to protect John Henry, Catherine Weaver walked into a drone factory where early forms of the aerial hunter-killers were being built, and she murdered the employees by impaling and slicing them with her polyalloy weapons. Eventually, Catherine Weaver meets Sarah and John and reveals her true identity to them, that she's a liquid metal T-1001 Terminator sent from the future to provide an alternative for Skynet. She further saves the Connors from a drone attack of the machines. Soon after, when John Henry goes missing, the T-1001 decides to follow Henry into the future, and so does John Connor. However, before departure, Catherine shows some concern for Savannah and asks Ellison to pick her up from school. Catherine Weaver's powers and abilities explored. In addition to the T-1000's abilities, this advanced liquid metal Terminator T-1001 had more powers. It could turn into a slimy slug-like form and move at great speed, escaping through air vents and performing incredibly high jumps. This slug-like form was even capable of swimming, like it did while escaping the nuclear submarine. Further, when the mimetic polyalloy of this T-1001 would be disintegrated, the scattered parts were able to function on their own instead of seeking out the main mass. Basically, the T-1001 could detach parts of its polyalloy structure, as Catherine Weaver secretly kept a portion of her body disguised as an eel in her office fish tank. This pet eel was actually the key to the machine's very own time displacement equipment. In one scene, after her office is burned down, the eel can be seen writhing on the floor before turning into a silvery mass and merging with her leg. Another interesting trait of the liquid metal Terminators is that they can conduct electricity, all thanks to their metallic mass. Unlike their endoskeleton counterparts, the liquid metal Terminators can tolerate a high voltage charge without being incapacitated. This was seen when Catherine Weaver electrocuted the T-888 Terminator sent to kill her and Savannah. She held the 888 Terminator with one hand, and with another, she stabbed a circuit box, allowing the high-power electricity to flow through her into the T-888, which was disguised as a water delivery person. And after doing so, Catherine didn't even suffer any damage. When it comes to combat, the T-1001 was extremely proficient at terminating multiple targets quickly. For example, inside the drone factory, Catherine was able to chase down dozens of employees and could seek them out from their multiple hiding spots all at once. She proceeded to kill them by fashioning both her arms into sharp weapons, extending as long as 10 feet to impale the fleeing targets. Interestingly, Catherine could also retract her blades with great speed, such as in the bathroom scene where she killed her colleague with a spike and dropped him dead with a thud after swiftly retracting the spike. This shows just how much control the T-1001 had over its polyalloy structure. The T-1001 is made of the same liquid metal as the T-1000 from the Judgment Day movie and can morph into anyone and everyone. Additionally, she can also transform into objects. The T-1001 was also capable of altering its size as it did to create a metal sheath in order to shield the Connors when a drone attacked her office. This was Catherine Weaver's most epic move. As a machine, she's only expected to kill humans, but she chose to transform herself into a solid metal winged statue-like object to shield the Connors from explosions and gunfire. In addition to all of this, the T-1001 was also capable of overriding pre-existing directives in favor of their own. The T-1001 also possessed some abilities of the TX Terminatrix, which was one of the most powerful Terminators ever created by Skynet, and it was introduced in the movie Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. Catherine Weaver's TX-like powers included detaching its body parts and her seductive abilities. However, despite being more advanced than the T-1000, Catherine Weaver struggled with facial expressions and mimicking human emotion. That's why the Weaver's daughter, Savannah, who was raised by the Terminator Catherine, found it difficult to connect with her. Throughout the storyline, Savannah remained unaware that her mother had become a machine. Introducing the lesser-known T-1002 Terminator from the T3 Eyes of the Rise comics. The third Terminator movie, Rise of the Machines, released in 2003 and had the TX Terminatrix wreak havoc all throughout the storyline. Not many know that in the prequel comic book series by Miles Gunter and Mike Hawthorne, which also released in 2003, another advanced liquid metal Terminator briefly appeared, and it fought against the movie's antagonist Terminatrix, albeit in training exercises. This liquid metal Terminator is a T-1002, an advanced version of the T-1000 prototype, and it's so cool, so let's talk all about it. The book series is split into 3 parts titled Before the Rise, Eyes of the Rise, and Fragmented. The T-1002 appears in the storyline of Eyes of the Rise. In this book, TX is training way ahead in the future, all the way in the early 2030s. The book is set in a post-Judgment Day world where Earth is a wasteland after the machines initiated the nuclear attack in 1997. Skynet is at the peak of its power and ruling the machine-dominated world. The issue begins with the TX fighting off a T-800 model in a practice session and easily one-upping it. It's all ready to go back to the past and kill Resistance members. This is when the liquid metal T-1002 is introduced to assess the TX's battle prowess, and the TX is forced to up its game. This T-1002 is created as a battle unit. It's more of a brutal combatant than an infiltrating assassin like its predecessors. Skynet assigned this machine to be part of the tactical testing of the TX, forcing the TX to utilize all of its battle maneuvers. Like all models of the T-1000 series, the T-1002 was also composed of the mimetic polyalloy that allowed its metallic structure to be fluid. As an advanced form of the liquid metal Terminator, it could transform any part of its body into a sharp weapon. In its non-combat mode, the T-1002 had the appearance of a chiseled male warrior, but when it engaged with the TX at the Skynet central core, the T-1002 generated spikes all over its body, even from its jaws, cheeks, and skull, preventing the TX from getting dangerously close to it. Much like Catherine Weaver, this one too could convert its tongue into a stabbing weapon. It was designed with a pre-programmed defense grid mode, which, when initiated, instantly transformed its arms into gigantic killer spikes. Created for heavy combat situations, this T-1002 comes with an additional deadly feature. Unlike its predecessors such as the T-1000 from Terminator 2 and the T-1001 from the Sarah Connor Chronicles, this Terminator can transform its entire body into one single weapon. The T-1002 twists its arms like entwined sinew and gradually morphs its torso into a gigantic sharp blade. Its legs lose the humanoid features and act as a support for this gigantic blade. This terrifying ability is unlike anything we've seen in any of the past liquid metal Terminator models. The comic book Terminator's ability to grow spikes all over its body and to transform into a blade itself is proof that this model has better control over its mimetic polyalloy structure than its previous counterparts. The one weakness of the T-1002 Terminator that destroys it. In its final fight with the TX, the T-1002 powers up with all its aggression and battle tactics and undergoes its terrifying blade mode transformation, but is eventually defeated by the TX's power charges. But from the previous T-1000 incarnations, we've seen that the liquid metal Terminators can withstand high-powered charges without suffering any permanent damage. So what happened differently here? The TX is what happened. The TX is designed to launch advanced and devastatingly powerful plasma beams, and a steady stream of the power charge caused the mimetic polyalloy of the T-1002 to completely disintegrate at a molecular level. The TX could also chop off the spikes from the T-1002's body using the built-in buzzsaw before going in for the plasma attack. And sadly, that's what wraps up the T-1002's brief appearance in the comics, and we hope we get to see more of this cool liquid metal Terminator in the future. Marvelous verdict! So folks, that's all the case files we have on the liquid metal Terminators for today. These creepy machines were the most efficient time-traveling infiltrators and the fiercest assassins of the Terminator franchise. So which one of these baddies turned out to be your favorite? Is it Catherine Weaver or Robert Patrick's iconic T-1000 from Judgment Day? Don't forget to let us know in the comment section down below, and thanks for watching, folks. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, we'll be back soon with more such videos. Unfortunately, it's time to say goodbye, so that means it's hasta la vista, baby.